Welcome, everybody, to our October Parent University podcast and part 2 in our series on bullying awareness and prevention. Today, we're going to do a deeper dive into bullying awareness and really focus on the role that we as parents might play. In this episode, we'll talk about the emotional side of parenting through bullying. As parents, I think we all want to protect our kiddos, but we also want to empower them with tools and confidence to handle those challenges. We really hope this conversation leaves you feeling both reassured and equipped with some practical tools you can use at home. I'm Amy Pfister, Community Relations Coordinator here in DCSD, and joining me today is Dr. Kelli Smith, Director of Health, Wellness, and Prevention for Douglas County School District, as well as Trena and Hope Ebel, Team Leads for Health, Wellness, and Prevention. Thank you all for being here today. To kick it off, we usually like to start everything with an icebreaker, so I thought it might be interesting. We're all parents around this table, just to kind of go around and say how old your kiddos are. Hope, you want to start us off?
Yes. So I have actually 4 kids, all under 10. So my kids are 10, 9, 4, and 3.
You've got a full household.
Yes, you do.
Yeah. Trena, how about you?
I have one 15-year-old, almost 16-year-old son.
And I have 2 girls. I have a freshman in college who's 18 and a junior who is about to be 17.
Okay. And I've got 3 kiddos myself, a 22-year-old, a 20-year-old sophomore in college, and then a 13-year-old. So we're really covering some bases around this table today. Probably safe to say that maybe some members of our households are familiar with the term bullying.
Correct.
For sure. Well, let's start with a moment that many parents dread, hearing that our kiddo has been bullied. That can be filled with so many emotions. And, collectively around this table, we've got kiddos of different ages, and we've probably all experienced that in some unique ways. When you first hear that your child has been bullied, what kinds of emotions are pretty typical for parents to maybe feel?
Do you want me to go first?
Sure. Yeah, however you guys want to do it.
So my kids had the pleasure of having a parent who was also a principal from the moment of birth. So I always had a different perspective. So when they came home and said things that happened at school, I would always ask more questions because there's such a perception on bullying and conflict. And it's so important that our kids understand how to navigate normal childhood conflict with support of their parents, but not to react. And I found if I reacted, they reacted more. So that was something that I really prided myself on and had to teach my husband. If my kids said something, make sure that you don't react, but you ask more questions, because then you can truly get to what the heart of the issue really is. And 9 times out of 10, it wasn't what they first said it was.
So maybe it wasn't bullying, it was
something else, or
they perceived
something else. But there's so much agency that's built with kids if they're allowed to navigate that conflict without us jumping in and assuming the worst.
That's such a good point, because I think that's tricky as parents. How do you balance your immediate protective instinct to want to protect your kiddo, but allowing them that agency to talk about things?
For sure.
How do you do that?
It's not responding first. I always, in every situation, I always try to stop and really reflect and ask more questions. Because again, 9 times out of 10, what they first say isn't typically what really happened. It's their perception of it. And again, if I was really elevated in my response, they became more elevated. So I think that would be my first piece of advice is be calm, even if they say something very reactionary. Because I have one child that will say things just to get a reaction to see how intense it really is. And then maybe backpedal, I didn't say that. So I learned from my kid.
They're the best teachers sometimes. Yeah. They really are. Yeah. They really are. Does anyone else have anything they want to share about that?
Well, I think just kind of bridging off of something that Kelli said, just talking about reaction, because my lens is a little different than Kelli's because I'm coming from a mental health lens. I'm a counselor. But one of the things she was talking about is reaction. And I think when you think of like when kids are really, really small and they trip and fall, and usually parents learn if they go right up to them and have a big reaction on their face, their kid will cry. And then you can't tell if they're actually hurt or not. So a lot of times you'll pause and wait to see what their reaction is going to be. And it's like kind of almost like listening to them and like kind of judging from their perspective what it's really like. And so I think it's the same with like when they come home and tell you something, you need to listen a little bit longer, ask those questions rather than gasping and like rushing to the school and, worrying. Because again, you don't have the whole picture. You don't have every single thing that your child knows. You don't know if they also did something. You only have a small thing of what they're saying. And maybe they just need to kind of process through it. So I think what Kelli said is really good advice to just, try not to gasp when your child comes home and tells you something. But yeah.
Yeah. Are there, because we do all have kiddos of different ages, are there differences in parents' reactions based on a child's age and maybe stage in development?
I would say that absolutely, depending on, the age group. And I think as elementary parents, we often tend to lean towards that side of emotional with our children, with our own children, because maybe this is the first time that you've experienced a bullying situation. And so that mama heart comes out or papa heart, and you're really impacted by the fact that your child is experiencing this for the first time. And so I think as we grow older, perhaps middle school and high school, I don't want to say that we're desensitized to it, but we've experienced it prior to that. And it's just a different set of experience. So what Dr. Smith shared, is very poignant in not reacting, but truly listening with intent with our children and ensuring that they feel heard and that their opinions matter and that we will approach the situation with a lens of empathy and reaching out to advocate as well too. But I think at all different levels, it's going to look different for sure.
I love that. And I think it's also important to note that we let our kids know that even if it doesn't meet the criteria of bullying, it still is a conflict that could need adult intervention. So that's the part that we try to get our parents and administrators and teachers and kids to even understand is if it doesn't meet the threshold of bullying, it doesn't mean that there's not going to be a consequence or a follow-up or that it wasn't hurtful, because we still have discipline that happens because of normal childhood conflict. And I think that's really important to understand as a parent that, yes, this is really hard for me to hear. It may or may not be bullying, but I can still have a conversation with the school about it and get help for my child.
Sure, and validate their feelings. I'm sure that's helpful for them, for kiddos to be, in tune and know that and recognize that. Be like, oh, somebody listened to me and they care. And, it doesn't matter. I mean, not saying it doesn't matter, but whatever the outcome is of that situation, it still matters.
Because there's far more issues around conflict that are hurtful than there are bullying incidences.
Absolutely. Yeah. What are some listening strategies that might help children feel validated and truly heard?
I think the best thing to do is listen rather than talk a lot and ask a lot of questions. Try not to guide the conversation. This is something that I got a lot of practice of as a counselor. I mean, they actually had like activities where they would tell you you're not allowed to ask, you're not allowed to like do anything other than reflect back what your person is talking about. Because I think that parents a lot of times want to direct the conversation, but just like going off of what they are telling you. And I think another thing is to just ask them how they think maybe they could solve the problem. What are some things that they could do to try to solve the problem?
I also think one question that we talk about in our house a lot is when the kids are upset and they come to one of us, we always try to ask first, are you telling us because you want us to do something or you just want us to listen? Because when our kiddos get into high school, they don't want you to reach out to the school. They want you to know that they were hurt but they don't always want you to go and reach out to, and that is really hard as a parent. There have been situations where, I'm sorry, you don't get to decide. I still get to do that, but I've had to hold back. But I like asking, listen first, and then say, do you want me to do something or am I just listening? What's my role here? Because that builds advocacy too and agency with them.
And I think also brainstorming with them on how they could solve the problem themselves, because we want to offer a sense of agency for our kids and build that resilience in them to be able to be problem solvers in the real world once they've left our nest and moved on as well. They're not always going to have us as an opportunity to come home and brainstorm with. And so we want to build that grit to in those problem-solving strategies for conflict resolution.
Absolutely. And I think, Kelli and I can probably speak to this firsthand. We're not there in college. They've got to navigate some waters, and that whether, your kiddo chooses college or not, as they get older, conflict is part of life, right?
Well, this is a great segue, what Trena just said around providing opportunities for our kids to build grit and resilience, because our community has done a lot of work around Jonathan Haidt's new book. I was just at a school a couple nights ago doing a kickoff to that book study. And his book, The Anxious Generation, really talks about how we provide opportunities or opportunities for kids to build those skills. And we're in an environment right now where we tend to be more protective in this outside world and less protective in the internet and tech world. And it's building different experiences and reactions for kids so that when they do get into school, they tend to look and scan for deficits rather than opportunities. So depending upon their experiences that they have growing up, are they scanning for what's wrong and who's going to harm them? Or are they scanning for, gosh, this is going to be super cool and this might be really fun to look at? Because when you get into school, it's easy to look around and see who might be about to bully you or about to say something about you. And I think to Trena's point, how do we support experiences that build those opportunities to be able to navigate social conflict in school in a positive way?
Absolutely. So just to extrapolate on that, how do we create those opportunities? That's kind of a, glass half full, glass half empty mentality.
Yeah, he does a lot of work in his book, and I've taken some of that and put it in some of my parent presentations around providing things that we might think, gosh, is that okay for them to play away from my house unsupervised and then get into an altercation with another student or another kid in the neighborhood, and I'm not there to help solve the problem? That builds those skills so that student can then do that when they get into school. And oftentimes now, because we have so much access to the world, we see things as parents that might be scary to us, and we want to protect them from that. And it's really robbing kids of the opportunities that they need to be prepared for that social conflict in school. And I know as administrators, we saw a big shift in that about 8 years ago, maybe, where kids were coming in more of a negative presupposition that someone was going to do something rather than a positive presupposition.
It is true. I think we as parents want to protect our kids from all the pains and hurt and, things that maybe we experienced in our lives or childhoods. But those experiences are what made us who we are today, right? And so you really do need to have those experiences, good, bad, and ugly, quite frankly, to grow into the human being that you're supposed to be.
It's like calculated risk. How do you let your kids have calculated risk? And maybe they do get hurt, break their arm, fall off their bike. I'm certainly not advocating for unsafe behavior, but I think some of those calculated risks, I know I learned a lot from things that my mom would have died if she knew that I had done. But yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's such a good point. Kind of shifting course a little bit here, but bullying can impact the whole family. And we as parents, take that pain on for our kiddos a lot. How can we as a parent care for our own emotions while supporting our kiddo through a situation like bullying?
I would say know your school policy. So whatever, and we have a policy on our website that really defines what bullying is. So if you're aware of that, you can help your child walk through, because there are times that kids will come home and you go through that checklist in your head and it sounds like it's bullying, and then have that partnership with your child's teacher. The teacher's the closest to that student. So talk with them first and see if you can come up with a resolution to that. And then next, school principals are fantastic at weeding through what the truth is. And we do have a bullying policy in our district, a bully prevention policy, and screeners that principals use for that. So I think getting to know what your school and district policy is and how to report that is first and foremost. Did you guys want to add anything to that?
So when I think about like the parent experience of when your kid comes home and tells you that they've been bullied, you automatically become fearful and you're worried about them and you're thinking, the worst. And a lot of times you're thinking something that's irrational and not actually what is happening. And so I think parents' self-care is super, super important, coping. And it's kind of the same that I recommend of students what you should do for your self-care and your coping, because modeling healthy self-care and coping is really important as a parent because you're modeling it for your children. But I do think if you kind of go through that process of talking to your kid and hearing from them and like seeing them be better, it can kind of temper that fear a little bit. Because the nice part about being like an educator and being at school, you see kids have complaints and then you see them later in the lunchroom and they're all happy. And then you feel better because you're like, okay, they're going to be okay. And I think that's the hard part for parents is they maybe don't see that part. They don't get to see their kid at school. So yeah, checking in with the school and talking and being able to like feel a little bit better, I think is a good thing you can do.
Right. Have that trusted relationship. You really need to have that going into, the school year, if you will, because it really does come down to trust, right? If you know that your kiddo's had a situation and you're fearful, watching them get out of the car and go into school and, knowing that maybe they've had a bullying experience, you have to trust that they're going into a safe space and that they will be taken care of.
And I would say, too, don't ever not speak up and wait. It's better if your child said anything that you reach out to the teacher first, just to put it on record so that they can watch for it and then that. Because it could get worse or it could get better. They could be laughing at the cafeteria in an hour. That would be the hope.
Are there any specific resources, books, school programs? I know you mentioned, and we will link all of this in our show notes as well. I know you mentioned the book, Jonathan Haidt's book, right? Are there any additional resources or books or community organizations that you would recommend for parents who might be on the front lines of a bullying situation in their home?
Common Sense Media has a lot of information when you think about technology and bullying, because that is something with kids having cell phones younger and younger that we're seeing more and more of. Stopbullying.org, stopbullying.org
Yep.
Is a good one. Our website has a lot of links. We did a parent university last year that's still up, I believe, on the district website. And these two are constantly updating our resources. With the new bully prevention policy, we're working on a task force right now to provide more resources to families and the community. And we just, this week, finished a digital balance training that these two will be delivering soon once I can get them the slide deck. I did it a couple of nights ago at a school, and it kind of ties into all of that. How do we build a healthy balance for kids around technology so that they don't get into these situations where they get stuck in a bullying? So a lot of things on our district site.
Do you feel like technology is playing more and more of a role when it comes to conversations around bullying?
I do, in the sense that there is a lot of fear with parents about when is the right time to get a phone because they're fearful of how kids are going to behave on the phone. And I really am trying to get parents to not think about age, but think about readiness in other ways, like how responsible is your student? That's a really expensive thing to put in their hand. And then can kids manage money? Because there's so many impulsive things that they'll be asked to purchase online that you might not know about. How are they in their social skills now? If they have trouble interacting in the real world, how are they going to react when it's two-dimensional? And how can they read those innuendos? So there's so many things that we should be asking that could lead to bullying situations before we even think about age. Because some kids we know are very mature at 12, and some are not mature till 18 with some of those things. So if we can get our understanding that it's not about age, it's about how do we handle ourselves.
And not succumbing to the peer pressure of, well, so-and-so got a phone. Well, so-and-so, has a device. That's a conversation that happens in my house on the daily.
And the cool thing about that, I was just telling a parent about this the other day, is there are phones that look like smartphones and they do nothing. Like it looks just, you can do maybe text two people.
It's like a phone, an actual phone.
It's like, it's not a smartphone, it's a stupid phone, but it looks like a smartphone.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then kids don't have that fear of missing out. And I think there are ways now, because people are getting more savvy about, my kid's not ready. And I would be afraid that they get themselves into a situation of cyberbullying.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Can we talk about cyberbullying for a minute? Is that, what are you guys are in schools every day. What are you seeing? what are some things that parents should know around, cyberbullying?
I think the gaming forum for kids is something that maybe parents don't necessarily have the awareness around of the amount of bullying that happens in a gaming environment. Just the prevalence of racial slurs and inappropriate language, and it's all ages. And so I think being very careful as to what your child is or whom your child is interacting with and what games that they're playing, and really monitoring those ratings on the games, as well as reading up on them as well too, to educate yourself about what kids are experiencing or they're witnessing in those gaming forums as well too, because there are several instances, and talk to your kids, especially because I know, my son talks to us a lot and has for quite a bit of time about the interactions that he's had on online forums in gaming. And it's pretty shocking. So I would caution parents just to have that supervision and that greater sense of awareness, especially when kids are gaming, and how early you're allowing them to start utilizing and interacting in those forums.
See, that goes back to that unfettered access in the internet world. Would we ever let our kids go out into a huge arena and just interact with anyone? That's exactly what we're doing in some of these online forums. And I don't think we really fully understand the grasp.
Right. There is a generational gap there a little bit, right? These kids are so savvy, compared to when we grew up, it's like it's exponentially so much. There's so much more available for them that they get, but don't really maybe get, that is just foreign to a lot of us as parents. So,
and it's important for parents to understand that that mature content is shaping their brain in different ways. And there's research that's coming out now that addiction-like changes in their brain are happening younger and younger with kids that are getting addicted to some of these games. And it's looking like drug addiction in kid brains. So not to go down that rabbit hole, but I think what Trena brought up is really important, that when we let our kids have online access to some of these games, we really don't know what they're seeing.
Right. So how would you broach that conversation with your kiddo if you want to establish some parameters? I want this brand new app or game or whatever it might be, and you as a parent don't feel like maybe they're ready for that.
Well, one of the things that we talk about is I think there were like 10 strategies of things that you need to prepare for before any online activity. And then you write a contract, and you have to make sure that you both live up to the contract. And if either one of you violate the contract, I think it's really important that we talk with kids about what their accountability is. Yeah, I think the online game is probably one of the scariest things. I think as a parent, my kids didn't really interact with that. We didn't have a gaming system, but I think that is a really hard thing to navigate. But making sure that you're well aware ahead of time and you set the expectation early, because you do have kids that are ready for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
I think also sharing your family values with your kids and really speaking to those and educating them on them, and then asking them, what do they believe in? What is the right way to treat a person? And if you don't feel like somebody's treating a person well, then how would you stand up for yourself? Or how would you leave that forum in that sense too? I think empowering them with the ability to stand up for their beliefs and what they feel is right or wrong is such a great gift.
Absolutely, because you're helping them build that empathy, around a situation, which whether that's online or in person, that's a lifelong skill. As we kind of wrap up here, I want to kind of go around and ask each of you, what is one final piece of encouragement maybe that you would share with a parent who might be navigating bullying in their household right now?
I think one thing we haven't really talked about was the power of empathy. And that's something that I always work with students on as a counselor if they come to me and talk about somebody being unkind to them and what that means. And I think that's really important, because that is a piece where a kid talks about somebody else being mean to them, and you talk about the fact that kind people or people that are in a good spot aren't mean to other people. The people that are being mean likely because somebody was mean to them earlier, or they don't have a very good home situation, or something is not right in their life. And the reason why I think that's so important is because then the child can think, okay, the reason that the person is mean to me was because of them. It's not because of something I did. It's not because I'm XYZ. It's because of them. And that piece is very powerful because it gives power to the child, and they can think about how it's really important to be kind to others and to kind of be thinking about that. And if someone is mean to them, they want to make sure that they get rid of that negative energy instead of passing it on, because that's what happens whenever we pass on negative energy. It becomes kind of a negative chain.
I love that.
I would say creating and setting up a safe space for your child to feel like they can talk to you about anything, and really validating their feelings and their voice, and using your school as a resource. The educators that, your child interacts with every single day care about your child. And so really leaning into them and having conversation with them, and promoting building of those resiliency skills and those deep and rich character traits that we want to foster in the lives of our students. I think that's the biggest priority is really building our kids up so they are advocates for themselves, as well as advocates for others as well too, and not being bystanders.
Absolutely.
Love that. We didn't talk about bystanders,
Yeah.
but that's super important. I think that goes with what I was going to have my final thought be, is modeling. So our kids are watching us even when we don't think that they're watching us. And if we are modeling empathy and perspective taking and sensitivity and kindness on online forums and in person, and if they see that we're upset with something, they're watching how we respond. Are we lashing out? Are we bullying others? Or are we responding in a way that's respectful? And do we have this respectful discourse? And I think that's something that we've lost a little bit of in the world today. And if we could get back to teaching our kids to disagree respectfully, if I could wave my magic wand, that would be what I would wish for.
That's such a good point. It's oftentimes do as I say, not as I do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really not, they are watching all the time. And are we as parents modeling that best behavior?
And we're their best teacher.
Exactly. Yes. I love that. Well, thank you all so much for being here today. Such an important conversation on bullying prevention and awareness. Our hope is that you as a parent walk away not only feeling supported, but empowered to take small, meaningful steps in your own family. Remember, you don't have to face this journey alone, and together we can create a safer, kinder, and more connected community for every student. If you'd like to learn more or access any of the resources we mentioned today, please check the links in the episode notes. And as always, thank you for being part of this important conversation. We'll see you next month for Parent University.